All right, this week's course was Fox Hollow Golf Course, which is in Timonium, Maryland. I played the course on Thursday starting at noon, and it was $40 with a cart at noon. It was a beautiful day, really nice day to play golf, very low humidity for the Baltimore, Washington area. Nice blue skies with white clouds and stuff. Although it did get very bright, and I got a little sunstroke in the afternoon, and a little hot and a little crazy. Started pulling drives, and in general, this course was so much easier, I would say, than the other courses that I've played that are slope 144 courses. This is not at all a slope 144 course. It's a 6130 from the blue tees, and in at least one case, the blue tees were not there, and they had the white tees out, and it was 50 yards shorter than marked on the hole. I think it was the fifth hole. Yeah, the tees are much shorter than indicated, and one has to be very careful on that hole not to put the ball well back behind the green into the bushes and woods and waste back there. But overall, the course was a nice course. It has a decent enough course clubhouse, nothing out of the ordinary. A nice pro shop, nice little cafe, but not much of a changing room, no showers. And I would say it is a fairly, utilitarian place that looks nice. Although it looks a lot like the other Baltimore course I played, though I guess it's the Woodlands on just off Route 7 and 695 over by Owings Mills. And in any case, very similar clubhouse, except that place actually had showers. This one did not. And it was just a generic bathroom, no real changing room. But basically, it is a course very similar to some of the Montgomery County courses like Laytonsville, although it's better. It is certainly a better course than Laytonsville. It's definitely a nice course. It's not quite as good as the Woodlands that I played over on off of I-70, but it's better than, I would say, most of the Montgomery County courses, or at least half of them, Laytonsville and Falls Road and so forth. It's definitely better than that. It is sort of between some of the courses over in Columbia, like Hobbit's Glen, and a decent course. Most of the holes, though, are very straightforward, straightaway holes with some verticality. There are a couple of doglegs and a couple of crescents and a couple of shots over crests in the middle of the fairway and stuff. But overall, nothing very tough. No elevated greens except for the 18th, which is I think it's like a 400-yard par 4, but the last 150 yards are uphill to a green at the top of the hill. The course is a 10-8 layout, so that you play 10 and then you come to the clubhouse and then play 11 through 18. And it's actually a decent enough course. I mean, I won't say it's a great course, but it does have some good, decent challenging holes. There's definitely some good verticality on the course. There's definitely some decent length. It says it's a short course, but there are definitely some 500-yard par 5s and some 400-yard par 4s, and it certainly is not a pushover of a course. The one thing it does not have is elevated greens. The greens are also not that fast, but they're decent. It has some actions on the green. Greens are in good shape. Fairways in good shape. This course actually, I would say it was a little over kept because the fairways were in pretty good shape, normal shape. The greens were normal shape, but there wasn't really any rough per se. It had 2-inch rough at the most, and there was not a lot of rough around the greens. It wasn't deep rough. It wasn't thick rough. It wasn't any kind of rough that was any real problem to play out of. While the course did have some sand traps, None of them were really big. There were a couple that were maybe waist high to come out of. I think number 16, maybe the par 3 back there is number 16, had a deep enough sand trap that was a challenge. And there were, some that were a challenge enough for someone, like me who wasn't really great in sand. And the sand was, decent. It didn't have any rough pebbles or anything like that in it. But it was still, brownish sand. It wasn't, white sand or anything like that. But the main thing is that there really wasn't much around the green. Obviously, there were still some holes, and there were certainly some holes where you had a background to worry about. Like if you went well back behind the green, like, 15, 20 yards behind the green, you had to worry about a drop off into the woods. That was definitely a concern. You didn't really want to hit long on many of the holes at all, because there was a definite drop off behind the green, and the holes were tight enough where the trees were in play to the sides of the fairways and near the greens. But the problem with this course is it's really over manicured. It's so well cut that the length of the grass is almost never a problem. Okay, in any way, there is almost no rough between the trees. There's almost no waste or anything that is near the greens. There's certainly some waste in some spots on the fairways. There are some ponds, there are some creeks and stuff, but nothing you have to carry to play the course, except for the par threes. I think there's some waste between the tee boxes and the greens on some of the par threes, but not in the par fours or the par fives. They're very straightforward. You just hit the ball as long as you stay, out from within the trees. You'll have a decent shot up. Even if you go in the trees, you'll be able to play out fairly easily. The only time you really have to worry about losing the ball or having a really bad shot is if you go off the sides of the course. There's OB in some places around a lot of this waste. It's not just on the sides of the course. It's also like, say, number 12, I think, which is a sort of a dogleggish par 4 or par 5. And in that hole, there are some spots where there's waste. There's some spots where there's a pond hidden by trees, things like that. Yeah, there's waste in play, especially on the back side, not much on the front side, but it's certainly in play off the sides of the hole. It's well out of those sides of the hole. You really have to hit fairly wild to get into that waste. For the most part, the course is pretty benign. Let's put it that way. And as long as you are in reasonable control of your shots, you won't have to worry about lost balls or hitting off, lost balls, let's just say, going off into the waste. So the other thing is the greens have sand traps to protect them, but almost all of the greens are not elevated, and there's almost always a lane up in the front of the green to the green. So in almost all cases, you can chip up the lane onto the green, unless you want to be aggressive and go for pins and chip over sand traps. Now, even then, the greens are oval enough to where you have a decent amount of bounce and run room. It's not like they're horizontal or wider than they are deeper, so that you have trouble if you chip and then you only have like 10 yards or 15 yards before the ball goes off into the quote unquote rough behind the green. And it certainly never drops off behind the green unless you go well off the green. And so it's really easy to chip on. The holes tend often to be long. The greens tend to be longer than they are wide, or at least as wide as they are long. So they're not really much of a problem to hit. I think only like number 7 was there really any kind of creek or anything between the fairway and the green. Now, the one problem is that on some of the holes, like number 7, number 10, and a couple of the other holes, there is a cemetery well in play off the side of the course. And it's not immediately in play, But if you go too far to the right on number 7, for instance, your ball is likely to bounce off the little crest on the side of the fairway, go through the trees, and go into the cemetery. Also, number 6, the cemetery runs along the fairway to the right, but on that hole, the fairway goes uphill, so you have to play uphill. You would have to play uphill from the fairway to go into the cemetery. On a few of the holes, it's certainly possible to play into the cemetery, but it's not like something that's right there or immediately of a problem. So this course is certainly benign. I actually was flirting with breaking 90, and I had a +9 on the front side, and even though the back a little bit, my driver got away from me a little bit, and I was a little bit wild there for a while, I still pulled in some decent pars and bogeys on the backside and came in with a +24, I think. So I had a 94 overall. It's a par 70 course. I had a 94 overall, well below the scores I've had lately at some courses, and certainly at least 10 strokes under my usual, like 105, 100. So the course, between the course and my getting some things straightened out with my game, the course was pretty easy. Not easy, but straightforward enough. I didn't have much trouble with it. I actually hit some decent shots and so forth. So a course that I can recommend for a beginning to intermediate player, I think an advanced player could play it well enough and have fun. I would not call it a tough challenge, but it's not boring either. It's a decent course. I can hardly say much wrong about it as a golf course, except for the fact that there were some incidents of greenskeeper-fouling, because literally there were 2 guys out cutting the grass between the first and third fairway, and this one guy had this big mowing rig, and he was out there just running around and around and around and around. I think there was a tee box and a green, the number 7 or 8 green, which is right next to that big electrical tower, high tension tower or high voltage tower, which you'll see in some of the shots. He went around and around and around that thing for about 15 minutes, cutting the grass. The grass was well cut already. There was another guy with a hedge trimmer thing, big motorized hedge trimmer thing, that the weed eater ones, and he was out there cutting around the roots of the trees and stuff, and they both were making a fair amount of noise and distracting the hell out of people, and I played pretty much the whole front side while that guy was still cutting the grass in that one section between those 2 fairways. It was just, we were sitting there and just watching him. I was trying to hit chip to a green. Guys on the next green were trying to putt, and we just stopped and just watched this guy go round and round and round and round and round. It was crazy. Now, yeah, you could play through that, sure, but it's a distraction. And it's an unnecessary distraction because the grass was already cut well enough. It didn't need to be mowed down a knot again. It was ridiculous to keep cutting it and cutting it and cutting it. And the guy wasn't really cutting anything. He was just going over it with this big lawnmower rig. So that was a distraction for pretty much the whole front side. We go to the back side, and there's no greenskeepers. There's no greenskeeper mowing. There's none of that noise. There's nothing. And it was just, a relief. You could feel the palpable loss of tension between playing the front side and playing the back side. The back side was, somewhat more interesting and more of a challenge to play than the front, and it was fun, and I enjoyed playing it, and it was, I think, all in all, a good round. Luckily, they put some water out there. They put 2 or 3, big buckets of water out there, because sometime around like the 14th or 15th hole, I was just like, I am just dry, and it was just, it got hot and sunny, and I got baked out there around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was just desperate for some water. And I'd already been drinking water. I'd been drinking tea and water and stuff. I actually got there and ate and then had tea and water and stuff. So I'd already had hydration, but I was just totally dry by the time I got to the 14th hole. Anyway, it was more of a challenge due to the elements than I think a challenge due to the course. The course was pretty straightforward, very easy enough, I would say. And I literally did very well in terms of a score on the course. Hit some very nice shots, had a good time playing the course, but I was glad to get off it. I walked off the 18th green. I was like, man, I am so glad to be done playing this course today. It was just a little bit too hot, a little bit too bright, a little bit too much heat and sun to play, and I got off just in time. I was just about fried, but it wasn't like it was a killer. And, it's only so bad it's going to be when you're riding around a golf course for 4 or 5 hours. I mean, a golf cart for 4 or 5 hours. So I can definitely recommend the course. If I also would say there were almost no houses, in view from the course. I think on 16, 17, there is a row of apartment buildings or something behind off to the side, and there's a school near the tee box for number 18, but for the most part, almost no houses. There's a house in sight on number 5. I think at the 5 tee boxes, there's a house back there. For the most part, no houses, minimal distractions, people playing and just having a good time playing golf, and it's a decent course. And it's not very long, and it's not very hard. So it has all the elements of a nice casual round. It's still interesting enough to play as a casual round. It's still enough of a challenge to play as a casual round. I would have to give this course at least a B. I would have to search hard for reasons not to give it a B+. And the greenskeeper-fouling, I think, would be enough to do that. So I'm going to give it a B and say that it's a good course to play, certainly a good round, and it's not in a bad location. It's not hard to get to. It's not like downtown Baltimore. It's north of Baltimore, not that hard to get to. It's just a drive from DC if you're going to go from DC. But if you're in Baltimore, it's, a fairly casual, convenient drive up 83 to get to the course. So that's Fox Hollow Golf Course in Lutherville, Timonium, Maryland. I give it a B, and it is a good round, nice course. I would guess it's probably a 120 course. I know it's probably a little bit more, but 120, 130 course, and certainly a good challenge. I certainly enjoyed the round, and I can definitely recommend the course.